Amanda worked hard as a paramedic, and her job was rather difficult. The young woman went on several calls per shift, and sometimes getting to the patient meant driving for hours on terrible roads with her partner Henry. Amanda lived in a small village, hidden in the dense forest, in the house of her late grandmother, who raised her ever since the woman's parents died in a car crash. The woman used to think about moving. Her ex-husband Brad was originally from the city, and so he often suggested that they should leave the wilderness behind and move to a big metropolis. Amanda liked his idea and even thought about selling her grandmother's house and investing the proceeds into their family future. But then it suddenly turned out that Brad has a mistress, and even more so, that she was having his baby. Amanda was also expecting her first child at the time, but this didn't stop her from getting out of the unhealthy relationship and divorcing her husband. After parting with Brad, the woman took antidepressants for a long time and suffered from insomnia, but fortunately, the difficult pregnancy didn't affect the baby's well-being in any way. She named her son Daniel, and the boy was growing up strong and healthy. He became the center of Amanda's universe, even though raising him alone was sometimes hard for the woman. But there are many good people in this world, and one of them was Thomas, an old man that lived next door. He used to be friends with Amanda's grandmother, and now he took up the role of Amanda's father and her son's grandfather. Thomas helped Amanda with the housework, bought them groceries, and babysat Daniel, mainly because he lived alone and only saw his own grandchildren once a year. With such help, the woman was able to quickly return to work, knowing full well that her son was in good hands. That evening, Amanda was driving home from work together with her partner Henry. They spent the entire day going on calls from one village to another. The woman was exhausted, so she closed her eyes for a minute, intending to take a little nap. They were only a few miles away from their village, but Henry couldn't go fast because the road was covered in ice. Suddenly, the vehicle's headlights illuminated a silhouette of some kind of animal that was lying in the middle of the road. The driver slammed on the brakes, and Amanda woke up from the strong jolt. "Are we there yet?" she asked. "I was just about to nap." "No, we're not there yet," Henry replied. "Look out the window. There's some kind of animal on the road. It must have been hit by a car. I'll go take a look and drag it over to the curb." Amanda hugged her paramedic bag and remained in the car, watching her partner. He bent over the animal's body, shook his head, and started waving at the woman to come out. When Amanda approached the animal, she couldn't believe her eyes. "Oh God, it's a she-wolf! How did she get here?" the woman exclaimed. "She is alive, but her belly is wounded, you see? Her hair is stained with blood. She must have been shot." As it turned out, the young predator was also pregnant. Her big belly immediately caught Amanda's eyes. The young people couldn't just leave the helpless animal to a certain death, so they dragged the she-wolf into the car. The woman patted the she-wolf on the head, deciding to do everything in her power to alleviate the suffering of the unfortunate animal. The predator seemed to have realized that the people wanted to help her and behaved calmly and patiently. Amanda took her paramedic bag and proceeded with the procedure. Because there was no time to waste, the she-wolf could die of blood loss. She shone a flashlight on the wound on the animal's side and gave her an injection of an anesthetic. Then she started searching for the bullet with thin, long tweezers. Having located it, the woman carefully pulled it out, treated and bandaged the wolf. The she-wolf was lucky that the bullet didn't go deep and didn't touch her pups. Amanda couldn't think of anything better, so she decided to take the gray predator home. Her son was beyond happy about it. The old man also supported Amanda's decision. Actually, he was even proud of it because he was very fond of animals. 3 days later, the wolf gave birth to 5 pups. Thomas and Daniel made a large wooden box for them. They lined it with hay and they placed the she-wolf and her pups inside. Then they put the box in the barn and came to visit the animals and take care of them every single day. However, a couple of weeks later, the predator had recovered and ran away, taking her pups with her. Although she did leave one pup behind. That was probably because it was limping due to a birth defect, and life in the forest was harsh, so it might not have been able to survive there. Daniel was devastated over the departure of the wolf family. He hoped that the wild guest would remain in his house forever, or at least until the end of the summer. Out of desperation, the boy even asked his grandfather to go looking for them in the forest several times, because the old man Thomas once worked as a forester and knew the area like the back of his hand. "Don't be sad, son," Daniel's grandfather reassured him. "But who would go willingly into the forest to look for predators? You have one pup left, sure, it's limping, but it's still a real wolf. If I had such a gray friend as a child, I'd be beyond happy." And in fact, Daniel and the wolf pup developed a beautiful friendship. The boy named the pup Batman because he had dark coloring around his eyes, which looked like a mask. He also taught the wolf some commands that dogs are usually taught. The two friends spent their days playing hide and seek, chasing balls and fooling around in the sandbox, and at night they fell asleep together in Daniel's room. Amanda was overwhelmed with joy and tenderness when she watched the relationship between the two best friends. But fate didn't stop at that, and Thomas's young nephew came to see him. A stately, handsome man had visited his uncle many times before, but this time he came to move in with Thomas, since Lucas got the position of the regional forester. Amanda had won the young man's heart a long time ago, and the feeling was mutual. Ever since his move, Lucas became a frequent guest at the house of the woman and her son, especially since visiting Batman was a great excuse to come over all the time. Daniel grew very attached to Lucas. The two of them went fishing on weekends, rode bicycles, and made bird feeders. The boy was incredibly happy, because Lucas was like a father to him, someone he never had in his life before. Mother, father, grandfather, and even a pet. It was a real family. One day, Amanda returned from her shift in the early morning and started making breakfast for herself and her son. Lucas was out doing rounds of the land. Daniel was still sleeping, and Batman was hanging out by the woman's side, having smelled the delicious food. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. The woman opened the door and was simply dumbfounded. It was her ex-husband. He hadn't changed one bit. "Hi, Amanda. How are you? How are things?" Brad said defiantly. "I see you're making breakfast, so I'm right on time. Let's sit down and have a cup of tea." "What do you want, Brad?" the woman replied. "You should leave before you wake up Daniel. We have nothing to talk about." "And how's that? I want to see my son. We haven't seen each other in years. He doesn't even know what it's like to have a father. I'll teach him how to grow up and be a real man," Brad continued. "Don't you even dare talk about Daniel. And what would you know about being a real man?" Amanda retorted. The man's eyes turned blood red. Unable to withstand the humiliation, Brad grabbed the woman by the shoulders and pressed her against the wall with all his might. Batman, who was attentively watching what was happening, arched his back and growled loudly. The man got scared at the sight of the wolf ready to pounce on him, so he released Amanda and backed away to the door, all the while threatening the woman, "You will regret it. I'll show you what kind of a real man I am." Unfortunately, Brad meant what he said. At that moment, a terrible revenge plan was already hatching in his mind. Amanda patted Batman behind the ears in gratitude and hurried to wake Daniel up. The woman didn't tell her son about the visit of his biological father because she didn't want to upset him, and she hoped that she would never have to see that awful man again. A couple of months later, Lucas proposed to Amanda. The young people wanted to hold a celebration by the local lake, inviting only their closest people. Thomas walked Amanda down the aisle, and Daniel and Batman were the ring bearers. It was a wonderful day, full of smiles, best wishes, and toasts. When it got dark, Amanda asked the old man to put her son to bed because the party was still going on. But Daniel needed to have a rest, especially after the emotional day he had. Hugging Batman, the boy and his friend fell asleep as soon as their heads touched the pillow, and Thomas went to sleep in the next room. It was well past midnight, but the celebration was still in full swing, when suddenly, the mood was ruined by someone's loud scream. "There's a fire!" The guests jumped out of their seats and rushed to climb a hill near the lake, when someone screamed, "Amanda's house is on fire! Call the fire department!" Lucas and Amanda ran home as fast as they could. There in the house, engulfed in hot flames, were their family. They had to hurry before something terrible happened. To their great relief, Thomas, Daniel, and Batman managed to get out of the house before it started to collapse. And all thanks to the wolf, Batman sensed danger, so he started howling and woke up Thomas and Daniel. A few minutes later, while Amanda was hugging her son and trying to pull herself together, Batman started growling and baring his teeth. He ran towards the forest and Lucas followed him, realizing that the wolf wanted to show him something. And when the fire department and the police finally arrived at the scene, they all got to see an incredible picture. The arsonist was caught and was now being led back to the crime scene by Lucas and the limping gray predator. It was Amanda's ex-husband, Brad. The police immediately detained the man, who was later sentenced to an impressive prison term. Amanda's house was reconstructed 6 months later. The young family didn't worry too much about it, since they had a place to stay in the meantime. The spacious house of Grandpa Thomas was a great place for the young family. Meanwhile, they realized that the house wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was that everyone was alive and well, and that they were no longer in danger.